Hey, Dan Tinquist here, your host of the Confidad podcast. So glad to have you back with us today. We'll begin this episode like we do every single one with our fatherhood mindset. Say it out loud with me. I'm the only one who can fulfill the father role I have, so I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, and so is tomorrow. I am wholly loved, so I will love wholly. Hey, today in our equipping section, I want to talk about what our silence is saying. And this actually has kind of a twofold power to it, a twofold perspective, where sometimes our silence should be used intentionally to draw things out of our kids, right? So we'll speak to that a little bit later. But the other side of it is understanding that our silence can say things we're not intending to say. Here's a little bit of an analogy for you. So as scholars look back on ancient documents, some are of the persuasion of being like, well, the ancient documents don't say anything about this. They're silent on this topic. So therefore, we can assume they must have felt certain ways about these topics. And that is a rather touchy way of going about studying ancient documents. Like there are several biblical scholars that I have come across where they're like, well, Jesus didn't say anything about this topic, so therefore he must mean XYZ. And whether you have any kind of horse in that race or not is not my point. My point is to say that a lot of times humans will have the natural reaction to say, well, if you're silent on something, you must mean X or you must mean Y. So they'll use it for a way to support their argument or to defend the other side, right? I think it happens a lot of times with our kids as well. If we are unintentionally avoiding a certain type of topic, say sexuality, say politics, whatever kind of touchy subject that there might be within the world, if we're not able to talk about that subject at home with our kids will start to make assumptions about where we stand or don't stand on such a topic. Obviously, this depends on the age of your kids, and you have to have discernment with like when do you bring up certain topics around your children. But the idea that like there are topics that are out of bounds or that we don't go there or we don't your silence will communicate something to your kids. And here's most often what kids will think. If you are silent on an issue, you are not safe in that issue. You don't have to be educated on it. You don't have to be an expert in it, okay? That's not what I'm advocating for here. But if we are silent on certain topics that might be taboo or might be touchy or might be sensitive, what our kids can start to hear from us, even without us saying anything, if we're silent on it, it means we're not a safe place about it, okay? I'm not trying to tell you you need to go read all the books and become super educated and really robustly expert on all these touchy subjects. But what I am saying is if we approach that subject with curiosity and we break the silence, we can then start to learn what our kids think about it. There's a really common misconception around the topic of self-harm. For a while, it was taught that we shouldn't use any language around that with kids because we didn't want to put the idea in their head. And then researchers came across the realization that adolescents can start to understand and pick up on self-harm even if they've never heard anyone talk about it specifically. It's a little bit harder to be guarded from that in this day and age with the internet and the way that it is. But what researchers pivoted on is they said, okay, we can't avoid the topic. We actually need to come forward with it because we're likely not going to put the idea in the kids' head, specifically kids dealing with anxiety and depression and self-harm. It was more important to broach the subject by the professional so the kid felt safe to talk about if they were having thoughts or feelings of self-harm or SI. So when you think about that, and that was that's obviously a very sensitive topic that is very important to broach in the right professional settings. For other topics that may have slightly less severe consequences if we don't talk about them, where are we able to start that conversation with our kids? Like I've said before, we have the majority of our conversations about touchy subjects or taboo subjects are around our dinner table. Because if we can have that conversation around our dinner table, our kids understand that, like, yeah, it doesn't make the conversation any quote unquote less awkward or less hard to have. But if we as adults are taking the first step of saying, this conversation matters and what you think about this conversation matters, we want to talk about it. Sometimes it's silly and they end up laughing, and it's just kind of, if the awkwardness gets the better of us and we kind of laugh about it, make a few jokes, and then we have important conversations. But the reality is that we've crossed the bridge and we've started the conversation. And so our kids are no longer able to make assumptions about a certain topic, say pornography, because they understand that we have started the conversation. And when we as parents understand our role is to lead our kids into healthy, confident, interdependent adulthood, we have to be the ones that begin a lot of these conversations. And if we don't, our kids will either feel unsafe around us in these conversations, and they will go somewhere else where they feel is safe in these conversations. So, our silence can communicate something in a negative sense because our kids will say, well, my parents, I've never heard them talk about XYZ, so they must not be a safe place to talk about XYZ. And we ought to be. We ought to be the first place that they run to. And we don't have to have all the answers. Like I've said before, one of the best things to say to our kids, I don't know, let's find out together. Okay? And it invites curiosity. It helps them see that, like, we don't have it all together, so it's authentic. And it helps move them into a place of understanding, like, I get to have these conversations with mom and dad without it being judgmental or feeling like I have to walk on eggshells. Okay? Here's the other side. So our silence, in a negative sense, can communicate that we have a certain assumptions or that we're not safe. But silence can be used strategically when we're in conversations of listening to our kids. So often, dads specifically interrupt their kids because they think that they have the answer and they think that they know what the kid is about to say. You ever done it? You ever interrupted your kid mid-sentence and been like, nope, here's what you're trying to say, and here's what you need to think? Yeah, it happens. But if we can utilize the gift of silence and start to strengthen that muscle of shutting our mouths and opening our ears, we can use silence as a tool to start drawing things out of our kids where they begin to feel safe. They begin to feel like we're leaning in and we have intrigue and curiosity to say, I care what you have to say. What you think and what you say matters. And as we lean in with silence, it can help our kids go, I do have a voice in this family. I do have a voice in this relationship. And we're able to use silence as a way to help build this bridge between us and our kids, because it builds trust, it builds confidence, and it builds a healthy relationship. I was told once in a training around facilitating small group discussions that you ought to wait 18 seconds after asking a question within a small group setting. 18 seconds is a long time to wait for a question. It's easier if you start counting in your head and you wait. But when I teach my clients about the time well spent method, these 3 5-minute windows throughout the day to engage with your kids with intention, one of those windows I teach about hearing. And I give these prompted questions, open-ended questions. And that is one of the keys to allowing your kids to draw out the depths of what they're thinking, is to ask the question and then utilize silence as your helper in drawing that out. Sometimes it works beautifully. Sometimes your kid's like, yeah, no, not talking about it. Totally fine. But the idea is, what it communicates to your kid is, first, if you're asking questions that are open-ended, it tells them that you care and you want to know them better. And then second, if you use silence as a way to engage and to draw those answers or those responses out of them, it shows that you're patient. It shows that what they have to say matters. It shows that you're not going to rush them through something in order to just get through and check a box, right? It's true relationship. It is truly kind to be able to wait patiently in the silence. Here's the last positive thing I'll say about the gift of silence. You ever been around someone that they just have such a peace about them that even in silence, their presence can be a blessing to you? I like to say it's like a non-anxious presence. There aren't many people that I've run into where they're able to utilize silence to communicate like a peace, a non-anxious presence. But when it is communicated and when you have experienced it, there's really not much else like it in the human experience of being able to sit and share air in a room without it being needed to be filled with noise and information and always doing something, right? I like to say we're human beings, not human doings after all. So our doing ought to be flowing from our being. Like, who are we in the silence? Who are we in the quiet? So may you be empowered today to understand, where is silence not helping you? Where are you being silent on certain topics or conversations in and amongst your family where they might be making assumptions about what you think about a certain topic, and also making assumptions that you're not safe to talk about that certain topic with? On the other hand, are you utilizing silence in your relationships in a way to draw out the depths of each other, to learn more and more about each other? And are you understanding that silence can be a gift within relationship that can communicate trust, love, care, patience, all of that without even saying a word? So today, maybe you spend just 35 seconds, start there, of silence with a kid and just be with them. See what happens. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you in the next episode.